Hi, everybody.
Do I see someone waving? Who's that strange person? Have we seen them before?
It's a figment of your imagination. It really
I
is.
say, strange person. Hello. Who are you?
Are you going to say hello, pip, pip, cheerio, and all that stuff? Because if so, I'm just going to go now.
I could just say, hey, pip, pip, chocks away.
I'm sorry.
No chocks?
To you out there,
Not
I am
going
so
away?
sorry.
Or otherwise?
Hello, everybody. Well, you have no clue how much I have missed. Do you know how frustrating it is for me? Lying in bed knowing that there's no way I can be on a show. Do you have any idea what that does to me?
We could always get you a remote camera and have the Pseudo lying in bed show. Could be a thing. Never know.
I think that wouldn't work on Twitch with terms of service there, Mizpah.
I am imagining a very fluffy duvet in all the right places. Let's make that very clear.
All the right places, not the wrong ones. Well, but
the ones that conform with Twitch's terms of service.
See, it would be kind of funny because you'd have me lying there and you'd have like right here like this gigantic Cthulhu stuffed plushie that I sleep with, and then you'd have like, you know, roused hours and a whole bunch of other stuffed animals because I love my stuffed animals. So.
And a Thomas the Tank Engine duvet.
That's you. That's you. I have.
Am I getting confused? Okay.
I don't even think you know what Thomas the Tank is.
It's a train that talks in the voice of Reverend W. Awdry as voiced by Ringo Starr. Written by Reverend W. Awdry as voiced by Ringo Starr.
Right. It's obviously getting to one of those things. I will state, I may not be normally as animated as I normally am, and I do apologize, but I have to be very cautious with how I sit. So, sadly.
And cautiosity is the buzzword of the day. I think we've just made that one up. If I was Salman Rushdie, we'd probably be getting an award about now, because he does that in all his books. He makes up words. But we've made up another show. Pseudo, what's today's show?
Oh, this is interesting. Actually, we've got a couple of bits of news, and I should probably go into them just so that people know. This week is a little bit bizarre because we're not going to have a top draw this week. We didn't have one last week, obviously, because I couldn't move. This week, the reasoning is because the gorgeous Dr. Marshmallows is currently in the process of working in a laboratory, and that's a terrifying thought. He is going to be in a lab the entire week, which makes it pretty much impossible for me to pull together a top draw show because top draw is not top draw without Marsh. So this week we won't have that.
I'm more worried about what's actually going to come out of the lab at the end of the week's research.
Let's just say that I am cautiously optimistic that it won't destroy the world too much. But on top of that, we have some big things coming up this week. Obviously, you know, we've got the campfire on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we still have the blizzard forecast. Thursday, we have the data mine. But we're giving away something on the data mine. And I am going to tell you, if you are interested in getting your hands on something that looks a little bit like this, and like what Mizpah is wearing, but different, and the fact that it is a little bigger and is orange, you are going to want to watch because we are giving away a pair of gunner glasses.
Okay, just to point out, that's not a larger size t-shirt.
No,
it's
but we
bigger. It's orange. Mizpah is wearing it.
But we are going to be giving away some gunner glasses to people. I should hopefully have them at the studio on Thursday, in which for me, making it to the studio and being able to get on a train this week, I will be able to show you before just simply saying, hand them out. Worst comes to worst, though, I'll be sitting in this chair and I have a picture that I can share during the data mine, but I'm going to do my darndest to get to the studio this week. But yes, and then Fabulous. On Friday, Gazimov will not be joining us, and we're hoping that Kai is going to be well again. But there are certain things in the works that I can't even tell Mizpah about until after the show. How crazy is that? I've been a busy bumblebee, even though I've been ill. So, huge welcome to everybody. Tonight, it's all about the concept of the type of MMO that is playable, be it a theme park or be it a sandbox. And I have a particular concept that I would like to postulate.
Feel free to postulate.
I get to postulate. It's not every day that I get to postulate, especially with Mizpah here. He's usually the postulator.
This is my attending to postulation face.
It's creepy. But I postulate that in order to have a good MMO, you need both sandbox and theme park elements.
Define good.
enjoyable to play, exciting,
then
and captivating.
I do not agree with your postulation.
Excellent. So, as you can see, we're already starting off on a great foot here, and welcome back to the Monday show where Mizpah and I don't agree.
Indeed. So, Pseudo, you would have me believe that the only way to have a good MMO is to embrace both theme park and sandbox elements within the game.
You should have a little bit of each. Absolutely. There are good qualities to both, and a good MMO that will keep me entertained will have both.
So here is my denunciation of your
Postulation? For some reason, we're using big words today. Tell you what, I'll even come up with some things that are pejorative.
The following.
I'm going to come up and state that anything Mizpah says is probably going to be pejorative to anything that I say, because that's just how he is. And there's a word for you today.
But meanwhile, I will pontificate and posit the following. There's a lot of P's going on right now, aren't there? I'm sorry. Okay.
Thank you, Screen.
I don't believe that you have to have both to have an enjoyable MMO. I'm not saying that will stop you having an enjoyable MMO, and I don't actually believe that you need to have a theme box or a theme park or a sandbox to have a good MMO. You simply need a good, cohesive design that's well engineered, that's well executed on, that has many, many layers of gameplay. I do not believe that that requires you to take both from the sandbox pool and from the theme park pool. No reason why you can't, but no reason why you have to. And we can point at deeply successful games. You know, Eve on one hand, EverQuest on the other, if we step away from the WoW idiom. It's another word to show that that's the point. So when truly successful games can be purely theme park or purely sandbox, why do you have to have both?
Screen, I love you so much. Screen says that's not what I said.
Well, you said you had to take elements of both to have
you should.
An enjoyable game.
I definitely think you should take
elements
from both.
I'm saying that's not necessarily the case. Because there are examples of truly enjoyable games where they don't do that.
Okay, well, here's the thing. Before we go into this huge thing where you and I sit here and create a debacle of and a mockery of the debating mechanisms that are inherent within what you and I discuss, let's define out sandbox and what makes a sandbox a sandbox, okay. And let's define out a theme park and what makes a theme park, because it's useful. I will state, I saw something I think it was about a year ago, maybe, oh God, I can't remember, but I saw a developer make mention of something, and they said, there are good qualities to both. And I agree, there are good qualities to both. One cannot say that Tetris versus Zelda, I believe is the reference that they used. Tetris is very, very much theme park, whereas Zelda is very, very much sandbox. Both are really good games. Both are... You just can't. They're hard to compare, and I guess you could say it's. There's always going to be someone's personal beliefs as to what they like and what they don't like about each element. There are going to be some people who swear to you sandbox is the wave of the future, and others who will tell you if a game's not a theme park, they hate it. So let's do the definitions. In your eyes, Mizpah, what is a sandbox? MMO. We should be very specific. MMO. We're talking MMO.
Like I say, it's made of wood. It contains sand. No. Typically, to me. And it's almost easier to define it the other way around and look at the difference between theme park and sandbox.
I purposely chose sandbox first.
Where an MMO environment where once you have completed, or maybe prior to, but typically once you've completed the growing, the leveling, the powering up, the basics of playing the game to get to whatever the end game represents, the choices in gameplay and the future options your character takes are driven by the environment that is created by other players. You're not off fighting a PvE dragon. You're not off on a raiding treadmill. You're not consuming new story-based content that's being delivered by the developers of the game. You are interacting with people and the environment created by the actions of people who are playing the game. That's how I define it.
I want to know what Screen's definition is because he's all do. Open world endgame is not a sandbox MMO. Interesting.
Open whoopin, technically. But open world game is not a sandbox MMO. I would define sandbox as the lack of structural gameplay choices introduced by the developers. That the players themselves develop the end game.
Well, see, I think you kind of have to ask yourself, I don't necessarily think that you need to use the term endgame in a definition. The reason why I say that is because you can very easily have sandbox elements in an MMO, and there's not necessarily an end game. You could choose to do an end game if you wanted to. I mean, Guild Wars 2...
I think that's a lot hard. Can I throw a question in? So this is a genuine question. Sure. I have not played...
You mean all your other questions aren't genuine? You heard it here first?
Sometimes I have answers in my head before I post the question. On this occasion, I do not. So I have never, to my knowledge, played a game where the act of taking my character from level 0 or power rating 0 or skill set 0 to level something, power level something, skill set something, has not included interacting with structured content created by the developers. And that is theme park. You're following the path to success. You're following the path to improve. I have never played a game where the content that I consumed to level, I know not every game is leveling, but it's good for the example, has been other player created. Is there one?
Okay. There's something to keep in mind, I think. You know, a world is created, let's just say, by the developer. Okay? And it can be up to the people playing it to do stuff with the world. They can introduce tools to make you have options to do stuff. For example, you could, for example, look at a game called Kenshi. Kenshi is a game that is under development currently. It is a sandbox MMO. It is incredibly twisted in its right because I have been involved with it even before it was pre-alpha.
Did you twist it?
Oh God, no! It's one of those games that, without joking, considering there is sand in the game, it is a sandbox. There's a desert. There's a really big desert, and they give you tools. You know, you have crafting tools available to you. You have grouping tools. You have killing tools available to you. But other than that, it is you versus the world. You decide if you want to go out and find and kill bandits. You decide if you want to go find guards and kill them. You decide whether you want that settlement to love you, hate you, or worship you. I mean, you are given just tools, but you're just sent out to do stuff. You create the type of story or content that you're interested in doing. To me, that's very sandbox. Now, if you have their purpose is not about, hey, you're leveling this, you're leveling that, etc. It's about there's a game to play, and yes, obviously, if you do building and stuff like that, you're going to get better at it because that's a part of how the game works. It's, I mean, old school things. I think it was Ultima Online was a sandbox. I mean, some people say Eve is a sandbox. It's not quite, but it is. Because it's just open world, go forth, do what you want. Or I should say open space, go forth and do what you want. But what they've done is they've given you tools. Now, we jokingly tease and lovingly say that Eve is very much so a spreadsheet game. If you like your spreadsheets, if you like your math, if you like all that other stuff, you can just go in Eve. But it still has theme park elements to it, believe it or not. So, you know, you have, in my opinion, what makes a sandbox is when the developers are not so much as focused on making you go and follow from Elwyn Forest to Red Ridge to Westfall, and I got the order wrong, but let's just say that's the way it works. They're not trying to direct you from where you're supposed to go and when. What they're doing is they're giving you tools for which to manipulate the world in which you live.
But the process of saying I am leveling up in this game, I am improving my character in this game, I don't believe I've ever experienced that in an MMO in a way that was not guided by quests and choices or by interactions with NPCs that led me to understand that if I did X successfully, I would get Y reward at the other end. And that I would describe as theme park. As Screen is saying, and I don't think I disagree with you, Screen, I think we're just using the phrasing it slightly differently. Anytime I'm undertaking any form of structured content from the developers, also known as a quest, pick your language depending on the game, then I consider that to be theme park.
Oh, Screen. You are so funny. Apparently, Mizpah is a PvE Care Bear. Okay, so I postulate to you this question. Would you say that a game that puts a heavy focus on PvP is actually Sandbox? Because it's player-driven content, isn't it?
I think that PvE... It does depend a little bit. So consider a game, and this is a fictional game here, and I know there's games that are very similar, but I'm trying to make a point.
Is your Badger MMO?
We can make it Badger Brush. So there is a fantasy castle made of cheese. In the middle of it is the Grand Badger Brush, and whoever strokes the Grand Badger Brush becomes the Grand High Poobah for a week, and their guild gets extra benefits, okay? And everyone goes to war to decide who's going to own the castle, to be able to stroke the Badger Brush to become the Grand High Poobah. And it's freeform. We don't know who's going to win and hold the castle. We don't know who's going to siege it. We don't know how many people are going to attack it. We don't know what's going to go on. There is a game mechanic in place that can be triggered stroking the brush. I would consider that to be Sandbox. Something whereby you enter into arenas and multiple tournaments and competitions to get a score, and your score is used for competitions and matchmaking and titles and rewards and armor and gear. I would consider that to be more theme park.
Okay. Here you go. Ryuk asks a good question, and I'm going to hit him with a big-ass answer, which I kind of typed, but I'm going to state it a little differently here. You know, what in the end is going to be the purpose of this particular topic and discussion? There was somebody who, a couple of weeks ago, made mention that in today's day and age, there are so many MMOs out there. If you want to actually keep your audience, you need to do something that involves both. If you want to be successful where it's not just the first sales that keep you, but you keep player subscribers, or you keep players playing even if it's an FTP game or what have you, you have to have elements of both Sandbox and MMO in it. And the concept is no longer, you know, should we look at the WoW model and see how successful it is and try to mimic what is technically a theme park, although there are tiny little Sandbox bits and pieces into it because there is sort of grind fests here and there. But in the end, it is player-given content. It is player-driven content in the form of I follow quest, I kill boss, I kill boss, I kill boss, or I run the same PvP places over and over and over. But someone actually stated that they did not think that MMOs can be successful in today's day and age unless you have both elements, and that you cannot keep your player base past initial release if you do not have both elements in some way present, beyond just the simple you have PvE content and you have PvP content, because one could technically, and I'm going to keep using the word postulate because the P's are in the brain today, so you could technically say the PvE content is always going to be theme park. I'm about to say trade park because for some reason that's the way it works. And PvP content is always going to be the Sandbox element of a game. But it goes beyond that. I mean, look at what Blizzard's doing with Warlords of Draenor. They're bringing out barracks, or your
garrisons.
Your garrisons. To me, they're the same damn thing. I'm probably going to get yelled at by, no, they're different. To me, they're the same thing. I'm a woman, leave me alone. I don't really mean that. But
that line, I've heard it so many times, just not on this show.
I'm sorry, Mizpah. But, you know, when you look at it, you can pretty much do whatever you want with it. Yeah, there are going to be certain confines and constrictions. Like, you can't probably get a particular building unless you have a certain building in place. Or, you know, there are going to be limits to how you do things. But some could say they're adding a Sandbox element to their game.
Maybe it's down to definition, because I still feel that Warcraft is pretty much a pure play theme park. And I don't think it's any worse for that.
Yes. So anyway, as far as we're concerned, when it comes to Sandbox, it sounds like we kind of agree that it is player-driven content based on the tools given by the developers, regardless of what those tools may be. And
to pick up on something you said a moment ago, if I can, before we switch up on topics, you were saying that if it's player-consumed PvE content, it must be theme park. And if it's PvP content, it's kind of going sandboxy. And I'd actually say that there's pretty good examples of the opposite in both. I would look... And actually, where does this sit? Look at Dungeons & Dragons Online, I think it is. That has... Is it the Exchange, which actually create content for other players to consume? But that content that you're creating
Neverwinter.
is effective. Neverwinter, thank you. The content that you're I haven't actually played it. The content that you're creating, effectively you are creating PvE content for other players to consume, but it's made by players. So what's that? Is that my theme box that I referred to earlier?
Oh, see, to me, that is still a theme box. Because, you know, it's... Okay, for example, it's the same thing with the architect from COV, which to this day I still find to be one of the greatest implementations of allowing players to create content for an MMO that other people can experience, but I also believe it is one of the greatest downfalls that they went through because of they revealed way too much of their system. They didn't allow enough of a random element. So in the end, you walked away going, oh, yeah, that was so easy. The mystery was revealed, so to speak, and your eyes were revealed to what it really took. Sorry, give me 1 second. But when you start dealing with something like that, it is still theme park because you instance the content, and it's quest-driven, and it's task-driven. But the task is still being driven by the developer. The task is still being driven. In order for a particular instance or a particular story or a particular bit of content created by the player to be complete, you must complete objectives. They didn't just let people go in and say, ta-da, just create whatever you want. You know, they actually, they monitored this stuff. I mean, in Neverwinter, they started killing off the instances that were grind fests because they didn't want people to be able to grind the experience in their own manner. Mm-hmm. You know, they didn't want people to break the system, game the system. Whereas in COV, it was done differently because it was based on the type of level that you wanted to go into. You had 5 different levels that you could enter in as a group, and it populated the monsters and the levels based on that. But, you know, it's still theme park because you're creating tasks. It's not like, I have created a building, enjoy it. It's, I've created a building. You now must go in and kill the guy who is dressed up like a badger, because if you don't kill him, you won't be able to get the key to the castle. That'll let you get the badger brush.
And that makes so much more sense to me. And this is why I struggle with a non-PvP sandbox most of the time. In that, why do I want to walk around the building? What is my motivation for walking around the building?
I think I should also use this moment to point out that Mizpah can't play Minecraft.
No. Well, I technically can. No, I have no problem manipulating the controls, picking up blocks and putting them down in random patterns. But why would I want to do that?
Mizpah can't understand the concept of creating content with tools given to you. So I have no problems believing that Mizpah has a hard time being able to see a MMO that is a sandbox like EverQuest Next. Landmark, check that stuff out. That's sort of sandbox, don't you think? Maybe a little bit?
And it is. And the element of that game that I like is the concept of building stuff to translate into the later MMO. As a thing to build something in its own right for the sake of its own existence. I love the technology, I love how well it works, but I can't see the point of why I'd want to do it.
And this is why Mizpah is not our creative director here at MMOBuff Studios. And I am. Oh, Miz. Seriously. Let me ask you guys out there. How many of you guys have actually played an MMO that you could quantify as sandbox, and what do you think made it sandbox? Because I'd be curious to know. Have you played EverQuest Next? Or Landmark?
Yes.
Okay. How'd you do on your plot?
I kind of loved the tools and what they did, and I got bored.
So you need to have someone laying out for you what you need to do next in order to be successful.
I wouldn't say that. I need to have an objective that I desire to achieve, the achievement of which leads to some form of benefit to my character that equals advancement in my brain.
Okay, so what happens if that particular content is created by a player? Like, we're going to play Duck Duck Goose, everyone's going to sit here in a circle, and we're going to run around, and I'm going to hit someone, then I'm going to run, then we're going to get into a duel, and whoever wins the duel gets some experience.
I've got no idea what Duck Duck Goose is, but okay. Um,
Oh god, please tell me you guys know what Duck Duck Goose is.
I know how to roast a duck, and I'd love to roast a goose, but they're quite hard to get hold of and protected by... they're protected by warrants? No, that's swans. I've never, ever heard of Duck Duck Goose.
Not even
I
when you
haven't
were a
heard of a
kid?
turkey. Nope. Never.
Okay.
Is this an Americanism we've stumbled upon here? Or do other people know what Duck Duck Goose is, who aren't American?
Okay, Duck Duck Goose is a kid's game. I don't think you were ever a kid. At least not when humans were kids. You were probably a kid while Tyrannosaurus Rex was trying to figure out how to move his arms. But Duck Duck Goose is when all the kids sit in a circle. One person is the chosen one, and they walk around the outside and they tap everyone's head. Duck, duck, duck. And when they say goose, they have to start running around the circle. The person who is goose has to stand up, chase them, and try and tag them. If the person who hit and said duck or goose makes it to the person's spot before they catch up to them and sits down, that person then has to pick the next Duck Duck Goose. I can't believe I've had to explain a kid's game to Mizpah.
And I actually can't really see the point of it, because someone's already standing, they've already got motive force, they don't need to stand up, they're exceedingly likely to complete the circle by the time someone has actually got to the act of getting to their feet and gaining forward momentum.
You'd be surprised. We're talking kids here. They're sprightly. You, on the other hand, you're getting old.
You'd be surprised.
I'm sorry. I think that's got to be a thing for me. Yeah. Mizpah, Duck Duck Goose.
Does the channel actually know what Duck Duck Goose is?
Yes,
I'm
it was
intrigued.
pointed out. Crazy Graphics says, "Are you serious? Duck Duck Goose is a kid's
No,
game."
they did. Okay.
It's basically a game of tag. Yes.
Rekichi is absolutely right. I also had quickly worked out that going across the circle to the perpendicular of the person running would have been far more efficient. So
but it would have been illegal and against the rules. You have to run around the outside. See, he's already trying to break a game. Anyway, going back to what we were saying.
Yes. So before you introduced Duck Duck Goose, there must have been a reason why you introduced it. Enlighten me.
I introduced it in the concept that this is a piece of content or a game or a whatever that was designed by a player, just using the tools that happen to be around the game, aka there was a dual tool, and you can get a benefit from it because you can gain some XP from the battle.
Then if my time invested versus XP gained makes it sensible to do so, then you would probably do it until such time as it becomes boring.
Okay, let's take you out of the equation for a little bit, because in the end, you have what I would consider to be an incredibly skewed concept of enjoyment. And it's because of the fact that so much stuff has to fit neatly in little boxes. One could say you're a little bit anal retentive, miss. Just a little bit. But, you know, there is something to be said for playing a game and not worrying about whether you are min-maxing every moment you're in the game. And there are more players out there who play a game to enjoy it than to min-max the hell out of every second that they are doing something. Just so that you know. So let's remove you from this equation.
I don't get to play Duck Duck Goose, sorry.
No, I have a problem if people play Duck Duck Goose with you. They would never make you the goose. They keep you the duck. And as Aussie says, persnickety. You're a persnickety when it comes to your game time. So yes. Sorry. But what I was referring to was, it is a content, and now at that point in time, in your opinion, if a player-created content or a player-created activity in a game does not benefit your character, you want nothing to do with it. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Not quite. I could see something being enough of a challenge that the act of completing the challenge was a badge of honor. Go in here, defeat 5 bosses one after the other, each one is increasingly hard, and see if you can actually do it. See if you can meet that skill bar. That would still be enjoyable.
Okay.
But it would have to be very non-trivial.
Now remember, we're talking MMOs here, Mizpah. The entire point of playing an MMO, at least in my opinion, is to play with your friends. So if you can do a game that is friend bonding, doesn't give me new pieces of gear, it doesn't give me XP, that to me is still incredibly important in a game. Whereas you would weigh it from the benefits. You would weigh the benefits of whether your character could be getting certain things.
But my cost-benefit analysis could include the group bonding to make use of in a later situation. Getting people moving better together, communicating better together, it's raid prep. Still has a purpose.
I'm honest to God speechless. I am honest to God speechless. I cannot believe you have literally just made me speechless. This has nothing to do with the sharp that just went up my back, but honestly, that's how you measure game activities. You have to find some way.
I said I could measure it that way.
Well,
but everything I do, I look for a purpose. There has to be some rational purpose that is enjoyable.
Okay.
To me.
That's why I said let's remove you from the equation.
I'll go. That's fine.
There you guys go. You put your votes in. Vote show with Mizpah, without Mizpah. Show with Pseudo, without Pseudo.
If you want to hear Mizpah sing again, ring 0845.
Oh, God, no. I will tell you, unfortunately, I'm going to have to be quiet for just a little bit because I have had a really nasty spike of pain. So can I leave it in your hands for just a couple minutes?
You can leave it in my hands for a couple of minutes.
Thank you.
I'm
going to disappear for just a second, guys. Don't worry. I'll be back.
I don't believe that you actually need both elements in one game. I think both can be good, but there is no reason not to as well. I'll say this quietly while Pseudo is not listening. I'm only contending the fact that you have to have both. Both can be enjoyable. I personally tend to get a lot less enjoyment out of pure play sandboxes. And I'm interested, particularly to those out there like Screen and others who are currently diving into it, as I am. Where do you find that Arc Age sits? Because at present, look at that, very nice. It just floated through by itself. At present, I am finding Arc Age, which is billed as a sandbox, to have quest-driven progression. I'm only level 10 at the moment. Have a fantastic environment. And I'm not yet running into the massively sandboxy elements of it. Now, I believe they're post-30.
They are.
And I'm particularly interested from a design perspective, how they're going to transition from one to the other. And I have to say that outside of PvP, I do not have a Scooby-Doo what I'm likely to be doing post-30, if there aren't things to complete. Yet I'm thoroughly enjoying the game up to level 10. It actually feels very EverQuest-y in a really, really good way to me.
Well, I
really like it so far.
I'm going to throw this question at you because of how they handle questing in that game. You can not fully kill X amount of wolfies, or you could overkill X amount of wolfies, or you could kill exact number of wolfies in the quest.
Definition means I have to overkill every single quest because there are greater rewards. So the moment I found that out, I have 100% of the time killed all the additionals. But I really like that mechanic.
Okay. That's cool.
Now, I haven't yet sat down and yet calculated whether it's actually optimal from an XP and reward perspective to do so. I haven't seen enough of a distribution of the differences between the drops, or the XP gained, or something else.
Okay. I personally think that when it comes to an MMO, you need to offer tools that let players come up with fun topics. For example, the Garabashi Arena. That was cool. You could kill your own faction, which was an awful lot of fun. I remember having guild meetings in the Garabashi Arena and then disbanding raid after we finished our guild meeting. And basically it was one gigantic free-for-all, and it was exciting.
We again used the Garabashi Arena as a place to take a tank and 4 healers so they could practice chain healing while DPS practiced both burst and sustained burst against the tank. The mechanics let us do all sorts of fascinating stuff for prepping for PvE content.
And yet
really useful.
We used it for the purpose of watching as people became egg rolls for one of our warriors who was a rage fiend. And it was just exciting and funny to watch how many people could try and take them all while damage was being done, because there wasn't, like in the game of WildStar, targeted, like AoE ground targeted types of telegraphs. It was just you could pick a person and off you go. But watching Warlock Seed go off in that is actually really funny as well, I'm just going to say.
Here's a question throwing in the arcade direction, because hopefully someone can elaborate, be it yourself, be it Scream, so whoever wants to jump in. Someone like me that's playing through the early levels of Arcade, loving the world, loving the environment, enjoying the quest, liking the story progression, actually. It's a little cliche, but I really like the story that's happening to me at the moment with my character. And I don't know whether I want to throw spoilers out there or not, so I'll let people tell me or not, as the case may be. There's going to be that transition point where it becomes more sandbox. I've seen it described as a sandbox with rails, and the rails eventually run out. Now, I haven't identified, admittedly, at the low side of level 10, a way to not focus on structured quest content that I define as PvE. Maybe I have no choice at this moment in time, but I haven't come across a clear choice of what shall I do now? Shall I just walk off randomly into the forest for no reason, or shall I actually do something productive? By the same token, I can't visualize what I'm going to be doing post-level 30, unless I want to focus on PvP, which is unlikely for me.
Scream would happily give you some information, but he's putting stuff in an article that's going to be coming out on MMOBuff, I think this week, actually. So you're just going to have to suck it up and not know.
And there are some comments for Screen about articles about that topic in Slack, but that's another story. We'll have to wait and see, but here's an interesting point. Is Arcade are the players that like Sandbox going to be bored until level 30? And are the players that don't like Sandbox going to enjoy the game up to level 30 and then fall off the radar?
This is why
have they blended both?
This is why I had stated at the very, very early part of this show that the important thing to me is that there needs to be elements of both in order to keep the people in your game. Because, one of the things that is great is that there are so many games coming out, so many MMOs coming out, and there's a variety of different styles, and you can look at all of them, from different types of artwork to different story to different types of action mechanics to combat mechanics to different types of focus in their game, etc. There are so many out there. If you are in charge of developing an MMO and you know that the competition is fierce, and you know that in the end, if you want to allow yourself to survive longer than that initial hype train that comes pre-launch, you have to be able to cater to multiple styles and make it a feasible, fun option for either. This is not to sit there and say, you must have one zone where if you walk this way, you will get sandbox. If you go this way, we will give you quests.
It's like a signpost.
That wasn't what I thought of when I did that, but that's okay. So it's not like I'm saying that. What I'm saying, though, is there should be, and this, for example, this is really twisted of me, but this is one of the reasons why I kind of like WildStar. WildStar has a little bit of a sandbox thing to it. It's the housing. You can do anything you want in your housing. Yes, there are rules and guidelines you can't go beyond. But if you wanted to, you could have, for example, as my husband recently found out, he took the ship that you got for pre-order, and he realized he could put it off his property so it looks like it's flying in to his property. You to do what you want with those tools, which is cool. But at the same time...
Which is probably why I have done some stuff with my house that gives me all the buffs. I stuck a load of plants inside the spaceship just because it was amusing. And I don't think I've touched it again since about 2 levels past the level that I could actually get it, because it's not needed for my core character.
No, what I say is what you did is you paid a guild member to come in and do your house for you, so you can say you put trees in your house.
No,
but
I
you
did put a couple in,
and
then someone else did the rest of it.
Of course. By the way, Radipole, good job on his house. because he sure as hell can't do it himself. But, by having that option available, there is a place for the creative people who understand how to take tools and use them. The Minecraft players, the Zelda players, the Final Fantasy old school players. I'm not talking the MMOs here.
But
I'm talking.
can I define another word that's quite important here? Because you've used it a couple of times.
Okay.
You've talked about knowing how to, and I'd like to make a point. I very much know how to, and I'm sure there's others like me. I'm sure I can't be the only one. The question in my own head is, why would I? It's not so much how to or can I, it's why would I or why should I?
Well, I'm going to have to unfortunately take you back to kindergarten, Mizpah. In all honesty, I am. This is not me trying to joke or tease or to pick on you, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you back to a time and age where you didn't have bills, where you weren't thinking about the things that had to occur other than the fact that you get to sit at a table with a blank piece of paper, paints, and your fingers. And you get to create whatever is in your brain. Sometimes
even at that age, I could not see the point.
Will you let me finish? You're asking me to do this, so I am going to explain it to you.
Okay.
I can actually, you know what? Screw it. You can't handle being a child. You can't handle that creative nature of it. I'm going to take you to a website instead because I know you work on websites. Okay? Being able to take the tools that a website, a language, anything gives you, and being able to take it and turn it into whatever you want is Sandbox. You could use the same exact tools. For example, we're Drupal fans. You could use the exact same tools to create so many different types of online applications, and yet you're using the same tool sets, and yet they all do something different. That is a creativity thing, and there is something to be said. There is a feeling of awesomeness when you take a piece that's sitting there in your brain, and then you see it visually somewhere else where other people can see it. You are not a storyteller, Mizpah.
I would contend that you build a website to serve a purpose. If you build an e-commerce site and it successfully sells more product than the previous one, and it has an amazing UX and UI, and the user is fantastic, and the compatibility is fantastic, and the visual aesthetics are great, but they're there to serve the purpose of selling product. That's what it is. It's a tool designed to do the job, and the job is what's important, the job that it does, not the tool itself.
You can't be... This makes me wonder how the hell you were able to roleplay on a tabletop. Because what's the purpose of role-playing in a tabletop game? You don't get experience points for talking like your character would talk. You don't get experience points for becoming possessed by a demon just so that you can take care of someone, although technically in Dark Heresy you kind of can. But, my point is, when it comes to that kind of a situation, why bother role-playing and why don't you just roll die? And yet I know that you have done role play. So why did you do the role play? You didn't get anything benefited to you as a character.
Actually, it did. It allowed me to control the interactions of the other characters around me to gain the benefit that my character wanted.
You live in a really dismal world. Honestly,
I enjoyed it. I had a great time. My thought process was, what would my character do to gain what it wants out of this situation?
See, that's the thing. I have this absolute drive, and I love... There are times where I want to have things in a railroad. There are times where I just want to mindlessly pick up the quest, kill X foxes, rip off the tails of so many bunnies, whatever. I don't care. There are times where I like that. But then there are times where I want absolutely nothing to do with that. I just want tools, and I go off and go crazy. Take a look at some of the stuff I did with Sims. Tools were given to me. It was up to me to just build whatever the heck was there. And in fact, I actually take my hat off to Aussie, because Aussie is the real creative genius there. He had visions in his brain of homes for people, and he designed them. And
they were hysterical. They were brilliant.
They're insanely good. Like, insanely good. But the benefit there was, it was so enjoyable to see the creation unfold. It was enjoyable to take what was here and share it with others so that they could see it and enjoy it too. I got nothing out of it than listening to people enjoy themselves.
that is a positive outcome in itself, and I won't dispute that one at all.
But
Reikachi's
it
pointing
didn't-
out that I was doing silly voices on the stream the other night, or a couple of dramatic voices as I do stuff.
Are you kidding me?
And
You do that all the time anyway. This is
Yes,
no.
I
This
do.
is you normally. I don't
It
see
is
the
me normally.
difference.
This is the crazy thing. So people know, as Reikachi doesn't know, I used to go to a dance and drama school, believe it or not. Thoroughly loved doing stuff on stage with complicated characters. Loved it to bits. But there's still a purpose. The purpose is the best possible telling of the play or the story. The purpose is the enjoyment of the audience. The purpose is the technical excellence in what you're actually doing. And all of those are very, very, very viable things that are worth putting tons of effort into, that are highly enjoyable for me, and if I get it right, hopefully enjoyable for others. But that's still far removed from the doing something just because, which is the bit that I struggle with.
Well, if you want to get technical, there's no such thing as doing something just because.
Yeah.
I mean,
And that's maybe a little flippant. I'm substituting that for a lack of what else to call it.
See, I understand, and we're gonna. This is gonna be great. We're gonna get a little bit into the human psychology for this, because technically speaking, one could say that I, as a person, if I were to put myself into a MMO, let's just say that real life, is an MMO, and my life is that, and I am currently suffering from an ailment and an affliction caused by stairs. In case you're wondering, that is how I hurt my back. But anyway, so in my particular case, my character experience is gained every time someone enjoys something that I have created and was able to either articulate or graphically design or pull together so that they could actually experience it in the manner that I felt was unique or different or something awesome. So I am always getting a benefit from that. Even if people dislike what I create, for example, our MMOBuff shows and things like that, we put these things together with the intent to share our thoughts with people. When I teasingly say we don't talk to hear ourselves talk, I actually mean it. We're talking to share ideas and perspectives, maybe get some people thinking about things they didn't think about before. But in the end, what do I really get out of it? It's those people who I meet. It's the smiles. It's the expansion of the people in my world that either agree with me or disagree with me, but still think it's cool to have a discussion. So I personally do gain from it. But I'm not looking to min-max life. I'm not looking to sit there and figure out, oh goodness, dear me, if I spent an hour doing an MMOBuff show, what is that really going to get me as a person? Now, if I wanted to, and there may be some people out there who do that, they may sit there and try to quantify a return of investment in some kind of financial manner. Or maybe they're looking at it as a way to, quote unquote, catapult themselves to stardom. I'm not going to be in a movie. I'm never probably going to be on a network. I do not think I am a marketable individual, especially in some of the shows we've talked about with women in gaming in general. But I do this because I love it and because I like having the interactions with the people who are there. I don't expect anything else out of it. So if in an MMO environment, that's my sandbox. My sandbox is I have tools, I create something, and I hope people enjoy it. Whereas I'm almost thinking that for you, it's a little different. I am now able to explain to people what I see, hopefully influence the world, change gaming forever, take over the world, and sit back and stroke my cat. You evil thing, you. I hate to say it, but when you're looking...
I'm a dog person, not a cat person.
I know. I hate to say it, but it almost seems like the way you approach an MMO is incredibly selfish. What is it for my character? What does it do for my character? I know that's not how you are. Let me stress this to people. Let me stress this is not how Mizpah is. Mizpah is not a selfish person. But every time I bring up an example, it's like, well, what does it do for my character? And so it can come across that way. But it just almost seems like in your real life versus my real life, it's vastly different.
In an MMO, I am very frequently playing to optimize my character. My character is how I keep score in the game for me.
How do you keep
that
score
doesn't
in real
mean
life?
100 different ways. It's an even more complicated topic. But yes, I do keep score in real life. In fact, let's touch on that because it's interesting. To me, maybe. Whatever you do, don't make Pseudo laugh, because then Pseudo's back will hurt, and that would be bad.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't do that. Anyway. Got an itch there, Pseudo. There are many, many ways of keeping score in real life, and it's not all about the car on the driveway, the money in the bank account, the people you know, who you golf with, or anything else. You know, sometimes you do stuff just to prove that you can, largely to yourself. At least I do. Quite often, you do stuff for the enjoyment of others. And, you know, I will sit down and calculate what is the optimal way to cook a meal to make sure that someone else gets the optimal enjoyment out of it.
He's only saying that because he's made beef Wellington recently. And it was good.
Or whatever the topic might be. But I will sit down and analyse what is the optimal way to do something. All the time. And it's not necessarily from a selfish perspective, it's from a good use of time, resource and effort perspective. And I don't have a problem like that. My mind does innately go, what is optimal? How do I do this? How do I measure what I've done so I can compare it with what I do in the future and work out what the better choice is next time? And that's just, to me, normal. And it's not cold or calculating, it's smart choices.
For you. Based on what
But
you believe the criteria should be for your real-life character.
Yeah,
to be
let's be
progressive.
perfectly clear. You could do something and the payoff is 100 people enjoy it. That's more than a big enough payoff. It doesn't have to be about, and now I have this. People enjoying stuff is a perfectly good payback for stuff. In fact, it's one of the best paybacks for stuff.
Oh, poor Monkey Ed says that you were never a child. You were once a robot. I disagree. I swear Mizpah came out of the primordial ooze in the form you currently see him.
That would be agreeing, I think, not disagreeing.
No, because that implies that you have robotic features to you. Now, see, this is the thing. This is I jokingly tease when we talk about topics that I come from things from a human interest perspective. You come from things from a spreadsheet perspective. But, you know, this is why I think it's so important that when it comes to an MMO, you must have elements that cater to both the sandbox lover, the person like me who wants those tools to just do something, and the person who wants to have the goals and agendas listed so that they know how to measure success. Because a person who cannot sit there and come up with their own goals and say, if I build this house in Minecraft, it will keep people from attacking me or killing me. It'll keep the zombies out, the Endermen from bugging me. That's a goal. You can have a goal like that. But if you sit there and you go, but I want it to be in these 4 colors, and once it's in those 4 colors, and I happen to find another tree that has a different color to it, I'm going to mix it up a little bit, and I'm going to design it so that it is not just functional, but aesthetically pleasing, and see that as a goal and a measure of success. You know, that's got to be there as well. So when it comes to an MMO...
I like aesthetically pleasing, don't get me wrong. I will look at something and go, I really like the colours of these dyes, and no, I'm not paying this much to change the colour because I can't see the point.
And yet there are going to be people out there who do.
Yes.
And see, that's kind of the point. This is why I think, you know, if you want to build an entirely theme park MMO, go for it. If you want to build an entirely sandbox MMO, go for it. But I honestly firmly believe that if you want to have an MMO that stands the test of time, you're gonna have to have something for both. And there are good parts to both. And I have to read this out because Screenager made me laugh. And instead of laughing, I'm going to read it because I can actually read things without laughing. And that's why I won't hurt my back. So you realize that we caught Mizpah, put him in the MMOBuff dojo to train. When he evolved as required, we released him to the internet. And no, this is not his fully evolved form. We didn't do so well.
Mizpah 2.0 will be back after the break.
Oh, dear God. But yes, see, this is why I firmly believe to have a very successful MMO that stands the test of time, you kind of need to have both elements. And, or at least elements of both, I should say.
Okay.
There should be.
I think part of what you're saying is actually going to be proven in the next short while. Arcade, which I've thoroughly enjoyed to date, does seem to be this blending of the two. And I actually am not going to contest the fact that a game that blends both elements can't do fantastically well. I think it can. I think it has to address the problem about how does it handle players that have converged towards one particular playstyle, and what do they do when that switch flips?
See, I think this is why when it comes to ArcAge, it builds itself more or less as the sandbox, because once you hit the 30, the rails peter off, your cart that you've been running around on these rails is now freeform. what happens.
It's going to be really
And
interesting to see what I think of the game once I hit level 30.
I'm waiting to hear your points of what's the point, because it seems to be one of your biggest complaints about Sandbox or concepts that seem sandboxy is what's the point? And I'm going to be curious to see if you can figure out how to create goals for yourself that make it pointful.
Or if they've created an environment where there are still goals to strive through or for, whilst leaving it very open as to how to achieve them. That I can buy into as a concept. That I have no problem with at all. But that isn't, I don't know if you define that as pure sandbox.
But
There's
see,
probably degrees of sandbox here.
It's entirely possible, but this is the thing, you know, in my opinion, you should have both if you want to keep the players.
So
That's
no
what I
harm in having
postulated
both.
at the start.
Yeah.
I
think there's no harm in
believe
having
it.
both. I think done well, it's a positive to have both. The only thing I'm disagreeing with here is the fact that you have to have both. And I point to things that aren't both that are staggeringly successful as the counterpoint to that argument.
And to the counterpoint to that, I point to the many people out there who play multiple MMOs and don't dedicate towards one because they don't get what they need from one.
But is that because of the difference in gameplay style, or the difference between want to experience different environments, different worlds, different social groups, different groups of friends, different mechanics, different goals?
That could be something to discuss next week. Who knows? But yes, it is basically time for us to pull this to an end, but we will do a brief post-show. And Mizpah's totally ignoring me, completely reading the chat, and that's okay, because you guys
Sorry,
are
I'm trying to keep up, make sure I haven't missed anything. Because we don't like to ignore people in chat.
Yeah.
And
So
Skinner
he
makes some
says.
really, really good points. And I think, Scream, we ought to talk about... I've actually put a comment in. There is some arcade content coming out. Other Themebox Sandpark games are available. And we'll see what happens off the back of that.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. You guys are absolutely brilliant together. But I actually, yeah, I've got so many awesome things that I have to talk to both you and Screen about, but I can't do it on air. So we'll just go ahead and do this. So when it comes to theme park versus sandbox, in the end, I think it'll always end up being player preference as to what you enjoy the most. This is obvious. I mean, Mizpah can't see the point, whereas I have no problem creating a point. That seems to be the biggest difference between the two of us. I can justify just about anything, whereas I think Mizpah needs qualifiers.
Let me add in a qualifier. Neither is right or wrong. They're just preferences.
Exactly.
It doesn't actually matter at the end of the day because we're still playing a game. It's how we choose to spend our time.
That I completely agree with. And I think the thing to keep in mind is regardless of what style you favor, remember that there's nothing wrong with someone else disagreeing with you. Mainly because I know for a fact that trying to get Mizpah to see something in a different perspective is pretty much impossible when I start talking about... There are certain topics and there are certain things where you just kind of go, nope, not for me. And it just ends there. You can't change somebody's mind when it's just not for me. End of. It just doesn't work that way.
I think that's not the same as not listening.
To be fair, though, I am exactly the same way. Where he starts to go off in one direction, I'm like, no, not my thing. So,
and that's fine. Strong opinions are absolutely fine across the board. People that don't actually listen to hear what the other person is saying, that can be really, really annoying because they could have the answer the other person needs, and vice versa. But there is nothing wrong with going, but I heard that, but this is still my opinion.
And I am and he doesn't realize it yet, but he's just made a comment that I am now going to edit out. And anytime he and I get into a discussion... and he goes to say something in particular at a particular time, I think he knows what I'm referring to. I'm going to just play that, and I'm just going to smile because he's just given me ammunition.
The missing words. It's okay. And if we want to play the record sound bites and edit them game, I can play that game too.
I was going to take it exactly what you said and just remind you of you said this. Remember, you said this.
Pseudo, it has been fantastic to have you back live doing shows.
I miss it so much. I know I'm not 100% on my game. I do apologize, but I am on painkillers, and my brain doesn't seem to want to work as well when I'm not feeling well. So, but at least I'm here.
I'd better make the most of it quick. Or something like that. It would be optimal.
I want to use a phrase to describe you, but I can't do it to the post show.
I'm just going to have to be unavailable for the post show now, sorry.
No, how about this? There's a word to describe you, Mizpah, that is not used outside of high society when not in a kennel.
Egalitarian?
When not in a kennel.
No,
There.
can't think of anything.
Of course he couldn't, because the goal's not there for him. It hasn't been laid out for him to know. No,
There is no positive. There is no positive outcome towards me following this path.
I have no troll skills, Raikichi. I just don't. But that's okay. Yes, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, I do apologize, but we're going to have to end it here and stuff because we're going to go into the post show, which just doesn't end up on YouTube. It's part of our tribute to those who are here live and stuff. But Mizpah, yes, it is an absolute joy to have a talk. I don't know, sometimes I feel like I'm hitting my head against a brick wall with you. And that's a good thing, because it'll jostle the brain. There's nothing wrong with hitting your head against a brick wall.
Nope, I feel like that about many people in life.
I'm one of them.
Only sometimes. Days that end in Y.
Exactly. Yes, my troll is in another castle. Poor Dr. Marshmallow.
I like that one, actually. The troll you are looking for is in another castle.
That came from Aussie. And the Duck Duck Goose. I still can't believe you didn't know what Duck Duck Goose
That's
is.
awesome, Osie.
Aussie! I swear you do it on purpose. You know, if I make it there Thursday, do not be surprised if I actually walk in and just smack you across the face for mispronouncing his name. I wouldn't do something like that. It would hurt my back too much. I'll wait till I'm well. Ow,
Fantastic.
ow, ow, ow. So yes, we're going to go to post show now. So say your bye-byes to the peoples on the YouTubers' lands.
So, turkey, pheasant to you all.
Wow, I don't even know what to say to that other than just simple toodle pip. We'll be back for the post show in just a second.